Welcome everyone to the launch of the How to Child Rights series. My name's Frances Sheehan and I'm part of the How to Child Rights management team. And we're really delighted that so many of you have joined this webinar and are curious and interested to learn more about this series. Before we get started, just some housekeeping matters. This webinar is being recorded and I think a message has come up to that effect, so be aware. And we're also lucky enough to have interpretation into both French and Spanish. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen the button saying interpretation, and please click on the language you require. We also have live transcription, and again there's a button at the bottom of your screen which will help you with this. So just to give you a sort of overview of our launch webinar today, we'll start with a short introduction to the series, what it's about, why we decided to develop it. We'll then have a panel discussion looking at how the series can support civil society in its efforts to advance children's rights and advance sustainable development. Our discussion will be moderated by Karin Ferk from Save the Children Sweden, and we're really happy to be joined today by both her and 5 very highly experienced and passionate child rights advocates. We have Ms. Makiko Otani, Chair of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, Ilaria Palazzi, Deputy Director of Child Rights Connect, Michelle Anglade, Director of the Save the Children's Office in Geneva, Tita Lasila, Program Specialist in Environment and Climate at CIDA, and Smiliana Frick, who's a consultant with CRIC Moldova, which is a leading organization on children's participation in Moldova. So above all else, this webinar is an opportunity for you all to see how you can get involved in this series. We welcome your thoughts and comments in the Q&A box that again you'll see on the crucial panel at the bottom of your screen. And in the collaborative spirit of the How to Child Rights series, we're very keen to learn from you how you think we can improve the series, grow the series, and how you can partner with us. And I'll give you some more information right at the end in terms of practical steps that you can take to become involved. Could I have the next slide? Thanks, June. So Save the Children initiated this series in collaboration with Child Rights Connect and many other partners. And why? Why did we do this? Because civil society plays an absolutely critical role in the implementation of children's rights and in holding states accountable for their obligations towards children. Civil society mobilizes public opinion, it builds momentum for changes in law and policy with children, implements myriad programs and interventions which support children's rights. But we felt increasingly there was a lot of guidance out there that was available to child-focused civil society. Much of it really excellent, but much of it quite long to read and sometimes challenging as a result to engage with. So we felt that really there was a gap in the market for a series of short, practical guidance, which is aimed at civil society and that responds to current and emerging issues relating to the implementation of children's rights. So the criteria we use for developing these tools and guidance that are part of this series is really quite specific. The tool must fill a gap in our knowledge of implementing children's rights. It must describe a practical process that civil society organizations can replicate, and it must be as brief as possible. Above all else, these tools need to contribute to implementation of the CRC and other laws and standards on children's rights, such as the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and Sustainable Development Goals. So what exactly is the series? It consists of case studies documenting different ways of working that are especially innovative in creating positive change for children's rights. It consists of step-by-step guidance on how to program in new and evolving areas. And it consists of selected summaries of longer reports and guidance on critical issues. So you'll see on the slide a list of tools that we have available and ready, and also some that are in progress over the course of this year. So the ones that are available already and have been uploaded onto the How to Child Rights website are highlighted in green. We also have a curated collection of other guidance which is relevant for different themes, which is also available on our website right now. The other tools that aren't highlighted in green are very much in progress. Many of them are absolutely near to finalization, and of course they'll be uploaded and available as soon as they are finalized. As far as budgeting is allowed, most but not all have been translated so far into French and Spanish. And we're always keen, of course, to have as much translation as possible in terms of whether resources allow. One thing I'd just note about the existing tools we've developed, they are all in written formats, but of course there's no reason why in the future we don't develop tools in different formats, such as videos or training webinars. And another issue to highlight is that these tools are very much living, breathing documents. They aren't supposed to be static, sitting on our website. They're being tested and they're being piloted as much as possible by different organizations, so they can be really grounded in the complex realities and situations that we all face in our daily work. The idea being, of course, that they will be improved and updated by the testing and piloting process. Could I have the next slide, June? Thank you. So our ambition with this series actually goes sort of far beyond simply producing these tools, although that's a hard task in and of itself. We don't just want to keep our fingers crossed that these tools will be used. The way in which these tools are developed has been very highly collaborative. They've been co-created, and there's a reason for that. So through this series, we want to actively encourage civil society practitioners from different organizations with different priorities and agendas to work together in developing these tools and guidance. We also want to encourage collaboration across different sectors. For example, bringing together organizations working in the environment sphere with organizations working more closely in relation to children's rights. For example, sharing expert knowledge and experience of working with the Universal Periodic Review or with the Voluntary National Review with those who are more new to these processes, so that all the lessons learned and all the great experience can be shared. Now you'll see from this slide some different dimensions of collaboration in the series so far, although there's lots of scope for this to extend more broadly. We're very lucky that we have a reference team who are a highly valued sounding board and give us technical assistance on the series itself. We also have been working with internal and external technical working groups, provided much valued input on many of the tools. And we're involved in a wide range of different partnerships and collaborations on the series as a whole, as well as on specific tools, including academic partnerships, as you can see from the list up there. So that's an introduction to the series, a little introduction into why we brought it into being and the stage that we've got so far. We're right at the beginning of this process. It's an exciting process. And I would like now to show you a short video that we've made explaining a little bit more about the How to Child Rights series. Thank you.
The How To series is a project about developing practical, short, demystifying, replicable and tested tools that can empower and support civil society from the ground in particular to advance children's rights in a more effective way.
The series is really about providing civil society with a practical resource to advance child rights, to share best practices, but I think most importantly, to inspire all stakeholders to really go further for children.
The How To series offers practical guidance, and it's also very easy to follow.
I felt these tools will be very important and useful for civil society because these tools are made by civil society for civil society.
One of the reasons why we started this series was because we saw that there were no enough practical tools for civil society to know how to link whatever they do with what the state is supposed to do.
We need guidance or tool, easy to use. And I found How to Child Rights is that kind of tool. It's fundamental for anyone who works on child rights, including the committee members.
The whole idea is that this series is to be based on civil society experience and expertise in collaboration with academia and other experts. We want to get the best out there for civil society, including children that are already active as human rights defenders, to know what's the best tips, what's the best way to do things.
The tool is really needed to bridge the gap that exists between the world of experts and those really trying to implement these standards on the ground.
We really want to be catchy for the practitioners. So when they read, it talks to their language and to their practical issues that they deal every day in implementing children's rights.
Donc pour moi, cette série, c'est vraiment un guide, une boussole qui va nous aider à nous renforcer nous-mêmes en tant qu'acteurs.
C'est-à-dire, comme vous l'avez dit tout à l'heure, ce ne sont pas des documents longs et il peut être utilisé, faire des guides pratiques à mettre dans la poche, à consulter à tout moment.
It gives you also this kind of very, very practical information coming from experience, which is very useful when you are at a table, engaging with stakeholders like national authorities.
The guides will be more useful because we have this collaborative process where we are ensuring that they're fit for purpose. And so we're testing them with the organizations that we are hoping would be the audience to use them.
The How To series was produced in a collaborative manner between different civil society organizations, drawing on their respective expertise.
We have so many good innovative things coming from the field, especially from civil society, our partners in the civil society.
One of the strengths of the How To series has been the principle of co-creation and collaboration. It's not something that is being produced by a large organization for smaller organizations.
I think it's also important to highlight that these tools are not just for international NGOs, but really for national, local civil society organizations to really use them.
They are so easily reachable now. You can find them in the resource center and be inspired and use them as well.
Tell us whether you like it, what else you want to see, any questions that you have.
The How to Child Rights series is made for you. This series is the beginning of a collaboration to advance children's rights.
Thank you, Francis. Indeed, as Francis has mentioned, one second, let me bring you to the website. Okay, indeed, as Francis has mentioned, we built this platform with the purpose for it to be a simple and accessible hub for children's rights and advocacy. A hub where civil society practitioners can easily access practical tools and good practices. So what we have done now is brought together a collection of tools and guidance that has been developed by experts and practitioners that are on recent and emerging issues in children's rights, and they're developed based on tried and tested practices. Tools, as Francis have mentioned, that are being developed by civil society for civil society. So as Francis has mentioned, what you can find on this platform are case studies documenting innovative and impactful practices, and step-by-step guidance on how to program in new and evolving areas in children's rights. So we have organized these guidances in the following themes: children's rights to a healthy and sustainable environment, children's rights with children, children's rights and sustainable development goals, children's rights by holding state to account. So as to keep these documents short and brief, we have also, you'll find here a master list of definitions and abbreviations used in all the resources on this series. So what we hope is to add to the existing resources on practical guidance on how to advance children's rights so as to not reinvent the wheel. We have also mapped out existing practical guidance that are published out there and consolidated them into a repository of tools that can be accessed here. We are looking to continually improve the tools hosted in this series and welcome active feedback and collaboration. So we would invite you to use this platform and hope that it would serve as a useful space for dialogue among practitioners, so that ultimately practitioners can continue to strengthen programming and stay up to date in children's rights. With this, I hand over now to Karin.
Thank you so much, Francis and June. And I will now give another warm welcome to our distinguished panel members. Very welcome and thank you all for joining us today. You have already got a brief presentation from Francis, and we will give you a chance to let us know a little bit more where you come from. But of course, we would like to hear from each of you now on from your perspective, how you see that the How to Child Rights initiative can play a role in the implementation of children's rights. And we should say also and mention that participants, as we said before, are encouraged to pose questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the page, and we can try to pick up any questions for the panelists after a first round of questions to each panelist. But I will start with you, Mikiko. You are the chair of the Committee on the Rights of the Child itself, the UN agency monitoring the implementation of the CRC. So this is, of course, key to what we're doing here. And the central aim of the series is to support implementation of children's rights in different settings. So in your view, how can the How to Child Rights series contribute to the mandate of the CRC committee?
Thank you very much, Karin. Yes, of course, the mandate of the Committee on the Rights of the Child is to monitor the implementation by the state parties of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But the purpose of the monitoring is to ensure the children's rights under the convention are actually implemented on the national level. And by monitoring, we make recommendations to assist the state parties to fill the gap of implementation. So our work, our work is for to make a change, real change in children's rights situations in the country. So first of all, it's very important for us to make would you hold on one second? Sorry. I'm so sorry with some disturbance. So the firstly, it's so important for the committee to make meaningful, relevant, and impactful and feasible targeted recommendations which fit in the context of the national situation. So we really appreciate the information submission from the civil society. But what is equally or more important in my view is the implementation of the recommendation of the committee. Once we conclude the reporting procedures by adopting concluding observations, including recommendations, the committee doesn't have the mechanism to follow up the recommendation, how our recommendations are implemented at the national level. So the stage goes back to the national process. And of course, our recommendations are addressed to the states, but very often states do not implement the recommendations so easily. So we need the civil society to advocate and help the governments to implement the recommendations at the national level. I heard in the opening remarks that there are existing tools already. However, those materials are sometimes long. In my view, one of the gaps is we have already a lot of materials which talk about how to write or reporting, but not so much about how to use the recommendations effectively, the follow-up. So I'm very happy to see this how to child rights series. Sometimes the NGOs who come and engage with us in the committee also need to disseminate the recommendations with the local partners and the peoples who are really working on the ground. And it's some concepts or procedures and words are very technical. And so it doesn't reach so easily to the people and the NGOs, practitioners, service providers, consultants who are really working for the children's rights on the ground. Finally, I think this tool is very, very important for our mandate. As a committee member, I feel very often that we committee members also need to get the feedback from the users of the recommendations. Again, I would say our recommendations are addressed to the state parties, but the civil society, children as rights holders are using our recommendations. So to improve our recommendations, to make them more effectively, we want to hear the feedback from the civil society who are using our recommendations and the children. So I believe that this tool produced by civil society for civil society would be also a very good tool and platform through which the committee can understand how our recommendations are used and how the civil society children see our recommendations and give us the feedback to strengthen our mandate and work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mikiko, and you're focusing on this very important aspect of following up to practical implementation of the recommendations. And I'm sure we can get some time a bit later on to hear from the team on how this is integrated in the actual tools as well. I will continue with Ilaria, and you are representing Child Rights Connect here, who is an organization, you're organizing civil society organizations in your organization, and you're acting as an expert organization to support civil society engagement in the realization and monitoring of children's rights with a focus on the UN mechanisms. How does the series strengthen the way in which civil society, including members of Child Rights Connect, can hold states to account for their commitments towards children?
Yes, thanks a lot, Karin. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And indeed, as you said, Karin, Child Rights Connect's mission is to empower civil society to advance children's rights through the UN system. This is why we immediately decided to partner on this project, because it's integral. The tools that we are developing together is an integral part of the capacity building work that we do on an ongoing basis with our members, but not only, with all civil society who is interested and motivated to engage with the Committee on the Rights of the Child, but also with the broader UN system. And I'm sure you know that the UN plays a key role in holding states into account. It's no need to say this again, but you know, what we see and what we hear every day in our work is that it's hard for civil society, especially civil society like grassroots organizations or local organizations, to really understand how to navigate the system. The system is complex. It's complex for us who are door to door with the committee and the other mechanisms. So it's a reality. There are many different mechanisms that issue many different recommendations to states, and that the way they operate is also constantly evolving. It's not like a fixed universe. It's the practices evolve, the standards evolve. So this universe is in itself an opportunity, but also a challenge for civil society. And you may have seen that a large focus of the How To series is about international mechanisms, and this is because the series aims to make this universe understood better, so that civil society organizations can see the relevance. Very often, this is one of the main barriers to the engagement, but they can also then find the motivation to put efforts and also resources into engaging with the UN. And this is absolutely key to maximize the impact of these mechanisms on the real lives of children. Without the participation of civil society, the recommendations coming out of the mechanisms would not be as useful. And this has been proved, and we just heard it from Mikiko as well. So the current reality is that civil society organizations are facing more and more challenges in their work, and we as a network organization, we hear this on a regular basis from our members and partners. Legal and administrative restrictions imposed by states, decrease in resources, lack of capacity, sometimes even reprisals against advocacy work, just to mention a few. This has been exacerbated by the pandemic that has put an additional level of pressure on individuals working for civil society organizations. And it has also significantly disrupted the functioning of these mechanisms that we are all struggling to engage with. So, you know, all this has had a negative impact on the level of engagement of civil society. And I believe that in this challenging context, we need now more than ever to support civil society organizations to keep up with their motivation and their work and make good use of the system. So the How To series not only is important, but it's very timely, because it comes to respond to civil society's increased need for technical assistance. And it also responds to the fact that civil society has less and less capacity, and practitioners have less and less time to read long and sophisticated documents. So the tools are meant to be useful for the beneficiaries, and that's why we work together with them to develop them based on existing experience. This is something that we also always hear. They wish to learn more what others are doing. So it's, you know, the approach is not us inventing things, is us sharing good practices or building the technical assistance based on evidence and practice, existing practices. And also, let me just mention to conclude, the series is also trying to address some long-standing gaps and challenges. We just heard from Mikiko that the committee doesn't have a follow-up procedure, for example. So this is something that has, let's say, hasn't helped with the work of civil society on how to use the recommendations once they're out, how to use them at the national level in particular. So with the series, we finally took the opportunity to address this gap. There are two upcoming tools in particular that are focusing on how to make use of the recommendations of the committee, the other duty bodies, the UPR, but also resolutions of the Human Rights Council GA that are tools that are very, very overlooked. They're not known. So we are really trying also, to address what we see that are the major gaps in terms of existing guidance.
Thank you, Ilaria. I will need to cut you a little bit because
I'm done.
We have so many really good participants here. And I would like to thank you. We will not have the chance to follow up on all the important input you give here. Unfortunately, we have limited time, but there will be other opportunities as well. I would like to pass the word over to you, Milena, because you are representing a civil society organization on the national level, the organization CRIC in Moldova, an organization with your point of departure in children's participation and children's rights, aiming in your country context to, as you say in your vision statement, inspire adults to listen to the voice of every child and work with children, families, authorities, public services, and civil society in order to develop and apply solutions based on children's rights. And you're also a long-standing partner of Save the Children since more than 20 years back. So from your perspective, how do you see that tools like the How to Child Rights series can support you and other civil society organizations working on the national and the local levels?
Yeah. So thanks for inviting me to the discussion today, and also to take part in the development and dissemination as well as using of the guides in the How To series. Right, as said by Ilaria as well as by Mikiko, the series is really addressing the emerging topics and the issues that we face in our practice. And those, from this point of view, this is how it comes as a support for us working at national level. Another aspect how the series is helping us is that it is an opportunity for national and smaller organizations to develop their capacities. This is the way how the guides are developed that is actually supportive of this. Developing capacities that we don't have, or developing practices that are emerging through the development of the guide, through collaboration with other civil society organizations and other organizations. As somebody said, this is like smaller organizations with bigger organizations, national organizations with international organizations together. And this is what we appreciate about this. This is the collaboration that we can develop, the feedback that we can develop, that we can get actually from other partners in the series, that can help really make these tools and guides addressing what we need and what is in our interest, and makes it, as somebody said in the video, more accessible to national and smaller organizations. So this would be one aspect to highlight at the moment.
Thank you so much, Milena. Extremely important, this collaborative aspect of the tools. I would now continue with you, Michelle. And you have a slightly different perspective as the Director and UN representative of the Save the Children International Office in Geneva. And with a lot of your focus is on the advocacy linked to UN structures for children's rights. So since many of the tools developed so far focus on how to engage with different human rights mechanisms, including the Universal Periodical Review, the Voluntary National Review for the SDGs, and of course for the Committee on the Rights of the Child review process. From an advocacy perspective, how do you see the benefit of this series for civil society organizations?
Many thanks, Karin, and congratulations to all colleagues involved in the development of this How to Child Rights series. I think that's a tool which is very, very useful, and I'm sure will be used by all civil society organizations to promote child rights. From an advocacy perspective, I think the series is very useful in the sense that it offers very practical guidance on how to do advocacy, and also highlight some case studies of successful advocacy, which, as Ilaria was mentioning, are the kind of sharing of best practices, which I think is very needed to uphold child rights. Maybe I would like to focus from an advocacy perspective on a couple of points. The first one is advocacy is absolutely critical, for child rights. It's about how we influence duty barriers so that, they are accountable for child rights and deliver child rights. And the first step, I think, which is critical in this process is for civil society organizations to clearly identify which changes we would like to see, both at the national level, but also using the different mechanisms you just mentioned to push for these changes. And I think it's important here to be quite specific. We see often in some recommendations that they are pretty vague, both from state level as well as from civil society organization level. So the more specific we are, I think the better. Which policies, which laws we would like to see changing, or to be amended, or which new policies we would like to be developed to ensure that child rights are being upheld. So I think it's important to be specific and to clearly identify the changes we would like to see at national level, but also using the mechanism to push this agenda. There's in the series an interesting example of how civil society organizations have used recently the UPR for Australia to push for the articulation of climate change as a violation of child rights. It was not very easy for civil society organizations to push this agenda in Australia itself, and they use the UPR mechanism to push it at the Geneva level, but then it's going to be used at the national level then to push for this agenda. So being specific about the changes we would like to see happening. The second point, I think, which is very clearly highlighted in the series is also to be clear regarding whom do we need to influence. And sometimes, we see how we need to influence the government. And as an advocacy practitioner, I say, well, whom in the government we need to influence, which ministries, but even within which ministries, which person are maybe an ally, which person may be opposed to the changes we'd like to see. So to develop very comprehensive power analysis is something which is needed for advocacy on child rights. And there are very good guidance in the How To series on how to do it. And then the series as well highlight how to develop an advocacy plan, which tactics are going to work. And it's important here to look at the varieties of tactics, which activities we need to do, and especially, which are the key moments we can use to influence. And here to go back to the, child rights mechanism, human rights mechanism you mentioned, it's very important as well to be very aware of the timeline of this mechanism. And Ilaria mentioned it's quite complex. It may change as well. It has changed also as a result of the, COVID pandemic. But there are very clear timeline and deadlines for these processes. And if we miss the deadline, we miss the boat. So I think it's very important also to be very clear regarding what are the windows of opportunities to influence. And I will conclude with 3 points, which for me are really cornerstone of our advocacy on child rights. The first one, and there's a lot of resources in the series on this, how we can make sure that it's also advocacy being led by children. And it's something as, child rights practitioner, we say, well, we need to do this, but it's often difficult to do. And there are very clear examples in the How To series on how to do it, and also how to mitigate the risk of doing it. And that's something which is certainly important. The second aspect I would like to emphasize, and I think the How To series is really an illustration of this, is the importance of partnership. I don't think that a single organization, a single civil society organization can achieve this kind of changes alone. So we need to work together. And there are also good examples in the How To series on how we can partner, to make these changes happening. And the third one is the point Mikiko highlighted. I think we need to follow up on the resolutions. That's critically important. There are a lot of good resolutions, but the follow-up is weak. So therefore, it's very important to see, well, what have been the, concluding observations, what have been the recommendations, and how civil society organization could use at national level this recommendation, this concluding observation, to basically hold government to account, to say, well, that's that's the kind of weaknesses, the kind of gaps in terms of, for example, the implementation of the CRC. This has been the concluding observation of the committee. And now we need to work together and we need to hold you to account to basically implement this concluding observation. So I think I agree with what has been said by Mikiko. It's certainly one of the weak links on which we need to strengthen our advocacy to make sure that the process is complete and translate into real changes in the life of children. Thanks a lot, Karin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. And I think that all of what you're saying is totally in line with the practical nature of the tools in this series and pointing to the real need of knowing the specificities of these procedures and being able to be practically active here. So the last panelist here is you, Titta, and you're a specialist on climate and environment. You're working in SIDA, the Swedish International Development Agency, but you're also having a background linked to children's rights in this area with Save the Children. So I would love to hear from you. A number of the tools in the series look at the specific relationship between children's rights and environmental concerns. So how do you consider this initiative could contribute to civil society work in this very important area? And I'm sorry, we need to keep it a bit within the time limit, but we will let Titta take her space as well. And we will then see if there's any questions from participants to the panelists. But first, you, Titta.
Thank you so much, Karin, and all the other participants, and hello everyone. I'm really delighted to take part in this panel. Yes, I would say that the last couple of years from an environment and climate practitioner perspective have been really interesting times because of the growing momentum with the Fridays for Future movement, the climate strikes, and growing discourse around intergenerational equity and climate justice. And because of this issue is still, even though not new, but quite new in the sense that environmental actors have not been very familiar with the human rights space, human rights mechanisms, and haven't known how to address human rights in relation to this, and not to even mention children's rights. And then human rights practitioners, they haven't really understand the connection between children's rights and environment and climate change. So there has been a huge gap in this. And even those who might have had the understanding and want to work more with these issues, they haven't had access to practical tools and real guidance on how to do this and how to address children's environmental rights concerns. So I really see this tool as supporting both the environmental movement, environmental civil society, and the human rights civil society in coming together in supporting children's participation in environmental decision making and action, protecting children's health and the right to a healthy environment, and with not only the resolution on the rights of the child to a healthy environment, but also the more recent resolution on the universal human right to a healthy environment, the pressure is on, and practical tools are really needed. And even us institutional donors, we hope to support this power shift from big international actors towards local civil society. And through these kind of tools, it's really enabling local actors, organizations to quite easily start working on these issues. Yes, that would be in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Tita, and all of you. This really, in a nutshell, where we are. There's so many things we could continue discussing if we had the whole afternoon. I'm a bit sad we don't, or we just decide we stay on, all of us. But I will have to ask Francis if there's any chance we can take a couple of more minutes to just pick up on any questions there might be from participants that have been written in the Q&A box. And I think that Rodina might be the one who has an eye on which questions have come up.
Thank you, Karin. We have one question in relation to how the Child Rights Series tackles issues related to children with disabilities, as these children may have some very specific issues. If so, during the development of the tool, did you engage with disability inclusion organizations? So in response to that, I would say that of the tools that we've developed so far, we have definitely involved issues relating to children with disabilities, and we've also included organizations that work with children with disabilities. But this question of specificity is important, and if there is an appetite and a scope for developing a very specific tool on a specific aspect of the rights of children with disabilities, we would be really excited and willing to partner with organizations who would like to develop such a tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Are there any questions directly directed to any of the panel members, or something we need to pick up on before we hand back to you, Francis, for a next steps part? It seems like I'm hearing no specific questions. Or would there be time for another question, Francis, or would you rather take over from here?
There was also a question, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it directly in the Q&A chat box. There was also a very interesting question about the rights of children who are stateless or who have refugee status, or, you know, for whatever reason, don't have clear citizenship rights. And again, that would just be a fantastic issue, I think, to address in quite a straightforward, practical manner as part of this series. I think that could potentially be a really terrific tool, looking at some very practical aspects of how we respond to the rights of children in that situation.
Thank you. And I think that now we've got already 2 responses to the question we would have asked our panelists if we had the time, about future focus of tools like these, where you see a need, a gap in knowledge, or a gap in tools for practical application. So I think this is a question we should ask all our participants, and try to pick up also from you panelists. We will probably have to do that after the webinar, because this is what we need to do to really pick up on the actual needs out there. Where are the gaps? Where do we need tools? We shouldn't do anything that's not needed, of course, but really try to fill the gaps there are. But apart from that, I would like to really warmly thank the panelists again, and then hand over to you, Frances, for the next steps.
Thank you very much, Karin. And just to say that we're aware that we received some really interesting questions from some of you at the point of registration. And I think there are some other questions coming through in the Q&A, and we will respond to those in writing, and we'll share those answers with all participants who've attended this webinar. As Karin said, I think it would be great to be able to sit here and discuss the role of civil society in relation to children's rights for much longer. There's a great need and interest in doing so. However, I would like to sort of move towards wrapping up this webinar. June, is it possible to show the slide? Thank you. The next slide with the, yes, brilliant, thank you. So coming up next, what are our sort of next steps with this series? What's our ambition? As I said at the beginning, we really are at the start of this process, and we hope that this launch will be mark the start of it. We have some more specific launch webinars coming up in the coming months that you can see on this slide. We've organized the tools and case studies and guidance that we've produced already and on the point of nearly finalizing into different themes, which we thought would help to kind of focus attention, focus advocacy efforts onto these specific themes as a way also of promoting the tools. So you can see, for example, that a date for your diary on the 1st of March is our first thematic launch on how to advance children's rights to a healthy and sustainable environment. And we have, I think, 3 tools that we'll be launching then. We then have on the 22nd of March, a launch of tools relating to how to advance children's rights with children, which includes a tool developed by an academic who's very active in this field, Laura Lundy, on how to develop child-friendly materials. Our third launch is on the relationship between children's rights and the Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically looking at the increasing role that civil society can play in terms of the voluntary national review process. The last 2 launches are sort of thematically branded around state accountability. Really, the whole series is about state accountability, but nonetheless, these are looking very specifically at different aspects of engaging with human and child rights mechanisms, including the tool that Mikiko referred to on how to use recommendations from UN and regional human rights monitoring and review processes. So there's a strong focus on those follow-up issues, which many of the panel members referred to. So that's what we've got coming up in the next few months in terms of the series. But in addition to these launch webinars, we're also very keen to co-sponsor any events that you might have already planned that relate to these themes. For example, if you have upcoming webinars or discussions, so that we can sort of maximize the momentum around that theme and the related tools. So any suggestions on this would be highly welcome. If you look at any of those launches and think, well, you know, we've got something really critical happening in April that would relate to this, then we'd be very interested in collaborating with you. And the next slide, June, thank you. And finally, a strong exhortation to you all to get involved. So this series is by civil society and it's for civil society, so we need you. We'd really encourage you to get involved, to get your networks, your partners, your teams, your colleagues involved as well. We want as many civil society practitioners as possible to feel that this series is helping them in their work. It needs to be relevant above all else. So concretely, what can you do? Please visit the website, which is on the slide, share information about the series far and wide, follow us on social media. We're particularly visible on Twitter. Help us improve the series. Let us know if you've used any of the tools, what you think of them, give recommendations for their improvements. Any feedback on the series as a whole and the premise of the series as a whole that you'd like to share. Help us keep this series growing by sharing a case study or guidance that you have that you think would fit the criteria for inclusion on our website, or contribute a new case study or practical guidance on an emerging area of child rights that can inspire others, or on a not so emerging area as well. For example, the two themes that have emerged in relation to the rights of refugee and asylum seeking children or children with disabilities, those would be really excellent examples. So get in touch with us about keeping the series growing and partner with us. So we're always looking to collaborate with experts and practitioners in the child rights sector to develop new tools, to review new tools, to pilot them, to co-host a webinar on a particular theme as we've looked at. We have sort of developed and piloted a methodology for developing these tools in a participatory way that we could share with you. And we're also looking for co-funding for this initiative going forward. So please reach out to us if you're interested in collaborating. But thank you very much for your interest in attending this webinar today. And I will pass now over to Karen for some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. And first, of course, thank you to all participants for joining us today and for engaging in the truly collaborative spirit of the How to Child Rights initiative. The chat box has been really active, and we will, as Frances mentioned, follow up on all questions asked and make sure that we can share questions and answers list. And a special warm thank you to our panelists for taking the time today and sharing your vast experiences with us. This will surely contribute to future development of the tools in line with the ambition to make them as relevant and as useful and as practical as possible. Thank you so much. And last but not least, a huge thank you to the team behind the tools. You have done an amazing job and you continue to do this. The core team, the reference group, all partners, Frances, Mats, all of you. I should not try to mention all names. I will surely miss most of all the important people. But you have done a wonderful, fantastic job. This is really, really a very valuable tools. Thank you so much. And the rest is to keep it up, and we hope to hear from you all, of course, and we hope you stay tuned for the upcoming launches as well. And then I will just have to ask the team, you have put the email addresses. If you want to make sure that you will get an invite for the next launch, will you simply sign up for the newsletter or for on the website, and you will get that, right? If someone can just shout yes, and people know where to go. Thank you so much, and see you soon in the next upcoming launch webinar, I hope. And enjoy using the tools as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.